Okay. So Dr. Phil Blustein is a gastroenterologist who has worked in Calgary for over 39 years. Gastroenterology is a medical specialty in gastrointestinal diseases, and he believes strongly in the impact of stress in contributing to physical illness and symptoms. He has a long history of interest in contemplative practice. He has studied Buddhism for over 28 years. He created a website, www.thebreathproject.org, for his patients to help them deal with their anxiety. The website contains animated videos on meditation and multiple talks from experts in mindfulness and meditation. He wrote a book, Mindfulness Medication, a physician's prescription for stress relief, that is a free download from the website, or it can be bought through the website. And there is a copy on the counter there if you'd like to purchase it for $20. He helped to create and support this Wellness Through Mindfulness group and our community that offers free teachings on mindfulness and related topics. And so we are looking forward to Phil talking about stress management in the holiday season, or the ABCDEs of stress management as well. Thanks, Phil.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. So many familiar faces, and thanks for coming out so close to the holiday season and seeing if we can learn a few strategies about stress management. So before we start the evening, we're just going to do a quick meditation in terms of allowing us to settle and come into the moment. So I would invite you all to just settle into your chair with an upright posture, feet flat on the ground. It may be of value to close your eyes because sometimes this helps with cutting out distraction for yourself. And if you can simply arrive in this moment by feeling your body. And if you just do a quick awareness scan of your body from your feet to the top of your head. And if there are any points of stress or tension, rest there, feel it, and let it release. And we can now bring awareness to the breath. And I would suggest that you try and bring awareness of the breath and experience the physical sensations of the movement of the breath at the tip of the nostrils. Simply, what does the breath feel like as it moves in and out? And this is no attempt to control the breathing. You are simply allowing yourself to be breathed by your breath and just bring awareness to the physicality of the breath at the tip of the nostrils. All that one is trying to do is to cultivate awareness of the present moment. And what we're using as an anchor for the present moment is the breath. And you will observe that each and every breath is different, changes, and ends. And this is a wonderful way to observe the nature of reality. Inevitably, you will lose concentration, attention on your breath. This is normal. Mindfulness is that capacity to be aware of the fact that you have lost attention on the breath. And whatever arises, can you simply bring awareness to that, experience it, feel it, and then go back to the anchor of your breath. And so we're going to bring this meditation to a close. And I would invite you to, when you're ready, open your eyes and come back to the room. So thank you for coming out this evening. And what I'd like to share with you is what I call the ABCDE of strategies for stress management. We all deal with stress in our lives, and are there simple, practical, and effective tools that you can use in the moment? I've had a mindfulness and meditation practice for 28 years. And what I want to share with you is what I have personally learned that I have found very effective for myself in dealing with stress. And what I am suggesting that you do is you do what the Buddha suggested. This is what is being offered. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, great. And if you can take what I say and make it work for you, that's better. So, the first letter is A. So what do you think A stands for?
Awareness.
Your pardon?
Awareness.
Awareness, absolutely. So what I like to talk about is awareness. They say we have 60,000 thoughts a day. 90% are of the past, the future, but we are only in the present moment 50% of the time. And even that I find is a bit of a stretch. How many of you have eaten a meal and have been so involved with your mind, technology, speaking to someone, that you finished eating the meal and you didn't even know what you ate or what it tasted like? How many of you have gotten into your car and driven from point A to B, gotten to point B, and wondered who was driving the car? So a large percentage of the time, we are on autopilot. We're just not aware of what's going on. But I like to draw the distinction between awareness and consciousness. Awareness and meta-awareness. This may be a bit of an arbitrary term, consciousness, but we can see that all of us physiologically register what's going on in our life. We can walk, we can talk, we can eat without us really knowing what's going on. Consciousness and meta-awareness implies you know what you know. That there is a sense of conscious awareness of what is happening. And I think that this is the first thing we need to cultivate, is that meta-awareness of what we are experiencing. The other important thing to recognize is that conventional awareness is not mindful awareness. It's a really big difference. When you're aware of something, you just know what is happening. But then what do you do with it? Immediately, there will be meaning-making and selfing. So conventional awareness is just the segue to suffer. The great distinction with mindful awareness is that arising with that knowing capacity is discernment and compassion, so that there is, with the knowing, insight into the true nature of reality and how we create our sense of self, which is the key to end the suffering that we experience. So, what strategy can you employ when you're in the moment or in any moment that supports awareness? And that is labeling, naming. And what you're doing is that as soon as you become aware of what you are aware of, thought, sensation, physicality, you label it. You label it from a non-self-referential, objective perspective. So what do I mean by that? Well, this can be done either in a general sense or in a specific sense. The key thing, avoid saying, I am sad. I like this ice cream. And so the way one can label one's experience is to start by either saying, thinking, feeling, move along, seeing the dog, feeling sad, move along, shift the perspective from what is the content to awareness. Sadness is known, or, which I prefer, because it puts it into a process of knowing sadness, knowing Joan. And by using that word knowing, it helps to remind yourself that this is a process of awarenessing, knowing what is happening. So let's practice this for a second and see how that works for you. So I would invite you all to sit up in your chairs and close your eyes. And can you simply bring awareness to what you know, to what you are experiencing, to what you are hearing, feeling. And can you then place the label on your experience in whatever way feels best for you? So how did that work? How did that feel to label your experience? Did it change it in any way for you?
I'm not sure what you mean by labeling. You're not saying it's first person, it's I feel this.
So what you're trying to do is to say, if I'm sitting there thinking, okay, or any experience, and I'm feeling sad or angry, so there's an emotion, you can simply say, knowing the emotion, or knowing the thought, or feeling a squeezing sensation. So you see, by labeling the experience, the first thing you're doing is you're anchoring yourself into the moment. You're making yourself aware, this is what I am experiencing. Second, by labeling it, we are so identified with the sense of self that it's hard to truly be aware of what you are aware of. But in order to be able to objectively know what you're experiencing, you've had to step back out of the sense of self, which allows for some non-identification. And the other tremendous advantage of bringing awareness and focusing what's happening is that when we are not focused, what do our brains and minds do? They go to what's called the default mode network. And the default mode network results in mind wandering, selfing, rumination. So a very good way to help decrease your suffering and your mind's criticism and judgment is to anchor yourself into the present moment. And that's why labeling your experience can be very helpful in doing that. So in the moment, when all of a sudden you're starting to get angry or sad, it can be very helpful to pause and say, knowing anger, knowing sadness. And this really helps to objectify what is going on and helps remove ownership of it. There's something else very valuable that can help awareness. You know, I would be aware all day long if I only could remember to be aware. We don't remember. So what we can do is that we can use cues. Cues are reminders. And when that reminder goes off, then that's the time we say, stop. What am I aware of? And so what are the cues you can use? Well, you could put Post-it notes up on your computer or your fridge or your bathroom. There are timers or apps on your phone. You could have your watch go off or your cell phone go off every hour. And as soon as it rings, that's the cue to say, what's going on? Or you can use what are called physical links. Before I eat, use my cell phone, send an email, go to the bathroom. That is the link that reminds me to pause and to bring awareness to what is going on in the present moment. So this is a very valuable technique that one can use as a way of anchoring you into the present moment. And the more that you can focus on what you are doing, there will be less selfing and critical thinking. B. Any idea what the B stands for? The commonest, most effective, accessible tool we have for stress management. Beg pardon? Breath. Absolutely. Very, very important tool. Let's try this experiment. I would again invite you to sit up straight, close your eyes, and now bring awareness. When you breathe in, are you breathing in through your nose or your mouth? Put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. And when you take a breath in, which hand rises? Which hand goes up? And now I'd like you to count your breaths. How many seconds do you breathe in? And how many seconds do you breathe out? Okay, let's open our eyes up. So, how many were nose breathers? Hands up. How many were mouth breathers? None. How many were chest breathers? How many were belly breathers? Your belly. And how many breathed in longer with an inhalation and breathed out longer than an exhalation?
Sorry.
Longer inhale?
How many breathed in longer with an inhalation, longer with an exhalation? So, you guys are all breathing fantastic. And the fact that you're breathing is fantastic. But so there are more effective ways to breathe than other ways. Breathing in through your nose is preferable than breathing in through your mouth. You humidify the air, you purify the air, and you allow for the release of nitric oxide, which is a vessel dilator. We have something called the autonomic nervous system. There is a sympathetic and parasympathetic arm. Sympathetic, fight or flight response. Parasympathetic, relaxation response. When you breathe from your belly with an inhalation, and when you have exhalation, that supports the parasympathetic arm and the relaxation phase. So most of you here already breathe through your nose, are belly breathers, and have a prolonged exhalation, which is wonderful. Because if you don't do that, that is something that you can cultivate. And if you are a chest breather, you can practice by simply lying down on the floor, putting a book on your belly, and focus to consciously have your belly rise when you breathe in, as opposed to your chest. So, in the moment, when you are stressed, the single most effective tool you can use is bringing your awareness to your breathing. In through your nose, belly breathing, prolonged exhalation, and ideally, can you achieve what is called slow breathing? And that is about 4 to 6 breaths a minute, which stands for about a count of 4 in and a count of 6 out. So in the moment when you're agitated, ideally, if you had time, you would continue focusing on your breath until the stress passed. They say that if you get dysregulated and you don't do anything, that will pass in 90 seconds. If you take five slow breaths, that's almost a minute. And you know what? I've noticed that within a minute, most things will pass if you don't amplify it. If there isn't the time, then just bring your awareness to the breath for one breath. But in an ideal world, can you continue to follow your breath until it comes to an end? I think the other key thing about breathing is I think you should microdose your breath. What do I mean by microdose your breath? I'm suggesting that you try and bring awareness to the breath as often as you can during the day. Because when you do slow breathing and you stimulate that parasympathetic arm, you are creating relaxation. You are decreasing that background tone of emotional reactivity. And again, you can use the cues throughout the day as a reminder to bring your awareness not only to what is present, but to effective breathing to calm you down. There's more than one B. Breath and body. So we have two very effective ways to deal with our stress. Breath and body. The problem with our body is that it really serves a function to support our head. We're really not tuned into our body. We're really tuned into our mind. So what's the value in coming to your body? Well, it gets you out of that thinking, ruminating, judging mind. When you anchor your awareness in the body, you can only be in one place, the present moment. Your body doesn't live in the past and the future. It only lives now. There's a real interconnectedness between mind and body. A calm body will lead to a calm mind. Calm mind will lead to a calm body. And there's one also very valuable reason to get into your body. When you were an infant, even before you had language, when you were stressed, your body immediately would prime itself for the fight or flight response. Because we are all biologic animals. We are all mammals at our core. And what do all mammals want to do? Survive. So whenever you perceive there was a stress, your body would immediately prime itself to be prepared for the threat and to respond to it. There is only one problem with that often that stress and the body reaction never got released. So we carry within us this historic, traumatic, somatic energy that gets triggered in the present moment. There was a book written called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And you know why they don't get ulcers? Because when a zebra is chased by the lion and escapes, what does it do? It shakes and it dispels all that trapped energy. If I was trapped, if I was chased by a lion, you know what I would be doing? Oh my God, that lion almost caught me. I shouldn't go to that water hole again. Oh, and if I was eaten, who would take care of my family? And I would ruminate and go over it and over it. So having the capacity to feel what's in your body is allowing the opportunity to mobilize trapped, historic, traumatic energy. Another interesting aspect, there is something called the thalamus in our brains that actually controls information as it flows from below to higher brain centers, and that shuts down during stress. And our speech center, that's responsible for complex thought, shuts down. So what does all this mean? You can't talk your way out of significant stress. You have to feel your way through it. So, let's do this exercise. And I would invite you to sit up, close your eyes, and I'd like you to do just a quick general body awareness scan. Just bring awareness to your body. And are there any places in your body that are tight, that are contracted, that are painful? We all have a characteristic way in which we hold our tension somatically. The commonest place is in our torso, chest, abdomen, and face. And the other thing that one can do is what is called a formal body scan, where one can bring awareness to the soles of their feet and quickly ascend up the body to the top of your head and see, was there any space of resistance or tension that I can now identify in my body? So you can open your eyes up. So what can be very valuable is that when you are stressed, immediately bring your awareness to your body. You can either do a general body awareness scan in terms of, okay, where's the tension? Or you can do a formal body scan by bringing awareness from your feet to the top of your head in a quick way. When you've identified a place of tension, stay there. Don't run away. You want to be able to face it, to embrace it, to engage it, to experience it. And if you had time, ideally you would sustain awareness until that body contraction passed. It can be helpful to bring the breath as well and breathe into that place of contraction. Now, sometimes you will bring awareness to your body, and it's like, I just can't go there. For whatever reason, it just doesn't feel right. I can only get so close, but I'm not going all that way. And maybe that's because what you're approaching is triggered historic trauma that's trapped in your body. So when that happens, there's one other technique that you can do, and that's called pendulation. Peter Levine, who created the somatic therapy, talked about pendulation. So what you do is, let's say you bring awareness to your body. There's the tightness. Oh, I just can't get there. What you do is you anchor yourself in a place of physical neutrality. Soles of your feet on the floor, buttocks on the chair. Stay in that neutral place. Settle. And then try and approach the area of intensity as close as you can get. And you know what? In the beginning, you may not get there, and that's perfectly fine. And you go back to that place of neutrality, and you come back. And for some people who've had unfortunate traumatic histories, experiencing the same physical sensation that triggers a memory of past trauma, they cannot get to that place. So again, as a formal practice, cues bringing awareness to your body during the day, because the body is a wonderful index of how much tension you are in. And by resting in that area of physical tension, you will allow for its release and that mobilization of the trapped energy. C, cognition, thinking mind. I think I've noticed in contemporary contemplative practice, there seems to be a denigration of our thinking mind. There seems to be a much greater emphasis on our body and compassion. And I think that's a mistake. I think the important thing is to recognize that there are various modalities that are effective. And our thinking mind can be a very valuable tool to dealing with stress. So the big question is, why do we suffer? I'm going to give this talk tonight, right? Giving it to you. When I leave, I'm going to get in my car. And what could happen? My mind is going to start talking to me. Oh my God, how could you have chosen this topic? Where did you ever come up with that idea? You know, you didn't talk about that very well. You didn't mention that. They all looked bored, like they were sleeping. There were no questions. This was the worst talk you ever gave, Phil. You are terrible. Do any of you have a mind that talks to you and says all these vicious things? You know, the reality is, if I really was in control of my thoughts, would I ever talk that meanly to myself? But this is very valuable to understand how we create our reality, because this is pivotal in understanding how to relieve stress. All of us creates a sense of self. We need a symbolic representation for who we are. Who are we in this world? That sense of self. So how do we create the sense of self? We all have a belief system about who we think we are. Where does it come from? Most of it comes from our infancy and childhood. We create beliefs about who we are. You see, when we were growing up, we believed we were responsible for our parents' happiness. And if they weren't happy, we caused it. And let's bear in mind, we were these small, defenseless creatures. We were very dependent on our caregivers, because without them, we would die. And we were very dependent on them in order to feel safe, loved, and worthy. And so each one of us here has a personal belief system about who they believe they are, how they should operate in this world. Every moment, what we are doing is we are referencing our experience against our belief system. Has the sense of self, who I believe I am, acted in a way that is congruent or incongruent with who I believe I am? Every moment we are creating a sense of self that is similar but different than the sense of self that existed in the moment before. We are creating a sense of self to act on our behalf to compensate for our perceived deficiency. I have a belief system that I need to be perfect in order to be loved. In giving this talk and determining that it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, I wasn't perfect. And my childhood wounding is triggered. And I believe I'm not lovable. And this goes on moment to moment. And so what happens is we create this sense of self based on deficiencies. And then what do? We own it. We create a self based on unmet needs, and then we own it. So this is the critical part to understand. The sense of self as a temporary, ephemeral, conditioned, created construct. It is not permanent. It's a process that arises moment to moment. Every moment we are determining if we are good or not. This is not about no self. This is about not self. In other words, we create a sense of self that is functional, that is utilitarian, that operates in this world, that allows me to give this talk. I, Phil, am giving this talk. I, Phil, drove my car here. So, understanding when we talk about this is not a denial about the fact that we create a sense of self, but it is also the understanding that it is a fabrication, that it is not who we are at our core. We came into this world and no one gave us the manual to live. And all we understand is that I am who I believe I am. And we don't understand that we have the capacity to be present beyond our conditioned sense of self. That we have the capacity to rest in what is called mindful presence. A place of innate compassion, innate wisdom, innate knowing. So, I'm not going to go into detail how we do this, other than to mention there are two basic ways. And one is through meditative observation, that we simply observe what is happening in our experience. And we will notice that there are three important marks of existence. Everything is impermanent. Everything changes, nothing lasts. If we grab onto our experience, we will suffer because it is impermanent. And the sense of self is no different than anything else. It is impermanent. The other way to come to this realization is through analytic inquiry and simply asking a series of questions. What actually happened? I gave a talk. What do I believe happened? It was the worst talk in the world. No one liked it. And that's sort of coming from an adult perspective. What do I believe this means about me and why? Inner child, I'm not lovable. Do I identify with my sense of self? Yes. I think that it's really very important. This is not an easy concept to understand. And this was not meant to try and allow you to say, I got it. I've been doing this for 28 years, and I can honestly say that it's taken me a very long time to appreciate this and to get a hint of it and a sense of it. But I have to tell you that it really gives you a liberating sense of suffering. And I'll tell you and explain to you briefly what's been my path along this process. And that I started doing this because why? I didn't want to suffer. I was a medical doctor, type A personality, stressed out. But for whatever reason, I had the faith, the belief that this was the right path. And I went to retreats, read books, listened to podcasts, meditated. And I discovered that over time, the practice began to do me. In other words, I was putting in this effort and learning And what was starting to evolve was a change in me that I didn't even intend to happen. That what started to notice was, I'm not as stressed out. There are less things that provoke me. When I get stressed, I'm not as intense. When I get stressed, I come back to baseline much quicker. My mind will still criticize me. My mind will still judge me. But at times, there is no energy in the sense of self or what knows it. It becomes words only that are passing through my consciousness and my awareness. And then ultimately, you come to the realization that for the vast majority of time, when your mind talks to you, you know what you need to do? Nothing. Why is that? Because you understand that it's all a fabrication. It's all made up. So what's to do about it? The present moment does not define who I believe I am. That I can be in the present moment with what is as it is. And by no stretch did this happen all the time. But I just really wanted to allow you to have a sense of where this is heading and the potential of where it may go. And this is just me, and this is just my experience. But I think there needs to be some sense of where the boat is steering to in order to give yourself some faith. And finally, there is no certainty when you get there. The only certainty is the uncertainty of what you will experience. And I think for each one of us, it's personal. C, compassion. This is absolutely essential for us to deal with our suffering. Feel with Act 4 is what one could define as what compassion is. So why is it so hard for us to be kind to ourselves? It seems that we're easier to be compassionate for someone else than it is for yourself. And remember we talked about the fact that what really is speaking to us is our inner child wounding. Well, here's the problem with our wounded child. It feels it deserves to be punished when it's acted in a way that is deemed inappropriate, incongruent with the belief system. So how can your inner child accept compassion when it feels that it deserves to be punished? Interesting perspective, why maybe we can't give ourselves compassion. But there is a way in which one can create compassion for yourself. And that is through visualization and creation of what I call an anchoring image. The problem why we can give compassion to ourselves is, well, I did this, I'm wrong. But if you can imagine that this is your child that is suffering, your response is totally different. If you can bring to mind an image of when you were a child that was in pain, suffering, and not happy, you'll be surprised what becomes evoked in you. A heartfelt response for your wounded child. And if you can't bring an image of yourself, then bring to mind someone you care about, your child, your grandchild, your parents, a partner, a friend, a pet, and bring the image of them as if they were suffering and allow that to evoke within you a heartfelt response. So this is a technique that you can use in the moment when you are upset to evoke compassion for yourself. I'm driving my car down the road. Joan comes up, she veers in front of me. My God, how could she do that? That was terrible. You raise your fist, raise your hand, say something that you might swear to her. Are we going to give compassion to Joan? Unlikely. Should we be thankful for Joan? Yes. And why is that? It's all about enrage or outrage. I'm angry at Joan because of what she has done. But what is really, really valuable in that moment that Joan did that to me was to identify what is being evoked, provoked in me. What inner wounding is being triggered in this moment? And identifying what that wounding is gives us clarity, insight, discernment. And the beauty of that is it allows me to remember, hey, Joan is no different than me. What's going on in her at this point in time? What inner child trauma wounding is she remembering that perhaps got her distracted and pulled in front of me? And just as I want compassion for my woundedness, Joan's inner child is no different. So very, very important when you are triggered by somebody else, reflect what's being triggered in me, what's being triggered in them. What compassion do I want? What compassion do they want? So that brings us to the final element, DE. Do it ethically. Action. When we think of conventional contemporary mindfulness, the aim seems to be relieve pain, stress, anxiety, and depression. Historic mindfulness is very different. The goal in historic mindfulness was to act ethically, to act skillfully. Mindfulness could never exist unless it was wholesome. And that the ultimate goal of mindfulness is awakening, elimination of greed, hatred, and delusion. So what happens normally? When Joan cut in front of me, did I consciously say, Joan? Absolutely not. I didn't know what I was going to say. And for the most part, I would say all of us act without consciousness of what is really happening. So here's what goes on, right? Inner child wounding, that moment is referenced against a belief system. My mind processes what is going on. I've acted in a way that's inappropriate. I need to act. I need to act in order to feel safe, loved, and worthy. And for most of us, most of the time, we speak and act without consciousness. Have you ever said something and right after you said it, you say to yourself, oh, why did I say that? So we have to bear in mind that for most of us, we act automatically, autonomously, and subconsciously. And we can only act skillfully with what we know. So the question is, how do we develop awareness for what we intend to do and for the intentionality of why we are going to do it? Mindfulness and meditation and focusing on the present moment and awareness will slow down how quickly your mind processes information. Because you see, we're very interesting creatures. As I said before, we react instantly, and that's all fight or flight. We may or may not act, but once we've processed and we're ready to go, there can be a very natural pause before we act, because it's our organism that's saying, hey, is this really a wise thing to do? So when you can bring awareness to what you intend to do or why you're doing it, it can be very helpful to say the word wait. W-A-I-T. And what does that stand for? What am I trying to do? What's the intended action? Why am I trying to do this? Intentionality. So before you act, before you speak, say wait. And then when you reach to that point of intentionality, am I acting because I'm trying to meet an unmet personal need? Or am I acting because I want to act skillfully with wisdom, compassion, non-harming, generosity, and respect? And the one last tool that you can do to ensure that you do act skillfully is ask yourself what needs to be done if it isn't about me. Can you imagine taking yourself, the sense of self, out of the equation of what you need to do? Very interesting experiment. I'm in my car, my mind's talking to me, right? Okay, Phil. What needs to be done if it isn't about me? What actually happened before there's any meaning making? I gave a talk. Okay. Do I know what any of you are thinking in your mind? No. Do I believe that you think it was the worst talk I gave? No. What needs to be done if it wasn't about me? Nothing. So I hope these strategies may be of value for you. Awareness, breath, body, cognition, compassion, and do it ethically. And so now's the time for us to open up the floor to any questions that you might have about this or anything related to mindfulness, and we'll have Joan moderate the evening.
Any questions like that?
So, do I understand correctly, Phil, that, so if someone cuts you off and almost kills you or whatever, you're supposed to have compassion for that person, what they might be going through? Is that,
Let me ask you a question.
Let me repeat the
Oh,
question.
yes, good,
Because of
fine.
the recording.
Yeah.
So your question, I'm just going to repeat it because of the recording, is that are we encouraged to feel compassion for somebody who does us harm, cuts us off, gets in our face? So Phil, could you answer that?
So have you ever cut somebody off in traffic? Have you ever acted in a way that someone else interpreted as perhaps mean or rude or cruel or?
I'm sure I have, but I certainly wasn't conscious. I feel, and it could be that some people are totally driving with, as you say, they're not being mindful at all. But some people look like they're driving a big truck, they're driving in 2 lanes, I feel like they're not thinking about anybody. There's no kindness of the way they're driving whatsoever. They could care less about the rest of the people. Now, this is my judgment. I have no idea if that's the case.
And so I would say that you are absolutely probably right. That they are driving in a way that is totally disrespectful, angry. But the way I look at it is this. I don't know their history. Do you think that an alcoholic wants to drink? Do you think that someone who goes out and kills someone else knows truly what they're doing? I think that all of us have had wounding. All of us have had wounding, but to different degrees. And, I read about this woman who attacked a pregnant lady and cut her baby out from this woman. Should I have compassion for that woman who cut out this baby from this pregnant woman's belly? Let's throw her in jail. This is absolutely horrible. Until you read a little bit further in the article, and what you discover, that this poor lady came from a history of trauma, physical, sexual, emotional abuse from the time she was 2 years old. And so all I'm saying is, I don't know your history. I don't know your history. But all of us are victims to our history. And so yes, I think every single one of us deserves compassion, because I think every single one of us operates from a personal belief system and narrative that they didn't choose. That my belief system was something that I didn't choose when I was growing up. It was given to me. But in all fairness, I can't blame my parents, because they inherited their belief system from how they were brought up. My mother was 2 years old. She lost her father. And she never forgot that wounding her entire life. And she would talk about it. All she could remember was the glasses that her father wore. In the old days, you would just put the glasses on the nose, right? And so, in understanding where her wounding came from, I can understand how she treated me. So yes, I believe that every single one of us deserves compassion, because we all operate from a personal narrative that we did not choose and dictates how we live in this world. Thank you. Good question.
When you were talking about the breathing and the body scan, and you were saying that you breathe into that area, does that connect with breathing out with the contraction that you breathe in? Can you talk a little bit more about that? The breathing out.
Sure. Do you want to repeat the question?
As best as I can do. And I'm sorry, it's a complex question about connecting your breath to the area of tension and bringing your breath in and then breathing out, and how to work with the area of tension with your breath out. Is that?
Yes.
Are you tuned into breath work?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let Joan answer that question because she's a breathing expert.
I am not a breath expert.
I thought you were.
Oh, expert. I've breathed for 65 years. I'm an expert, 65 years of breathing. You go.
Okay, and if you ever want to add anything or answer the questions, you're welcome to. There are many ways in which we can breathe. We learn about the box breathing, right? Holding your breath. I have offered one simple way to breathe because I think it's very direct and accessible. And I think that sometimes adding modalities together can be very helpful. And that's why I think that cues are a tremendous way to anchor you. So when you remember to remember, what do you remember? Do you remember of sadness? Body, breath. And so I think that, and this is a very, very important part about mindfulness, that it is a process of engagement. That you are facing, embracing, experiencing what is unfolding. So you get into that body and you really allow yourself to feel it fullest without resistance. And then I'm just simply saying that in that area of tension within one's belly, you're breathing in, and then you can actually try and imagine yourself breathing out through that area of tension. So it's simply a way of compounding different modalities in order to support stress relief. Okay.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that question is that as I have learned that there's something in where you're holding in stress in your body, and when you breathe in and when you breathe out, if you can find a way to let go of that contracting muscle, that it brings relief. So that's just what I was asking.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, about allowing us to talk about the combination and the exhalation as supporting relaxation of the area of contraction. Any other questions? Must be a few. Just gonna try to think.
Well, I don't want to take.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I guess, this is the holidays, we're talking about stress during the holidays. And
Yes.
so you go to a Christmas party or a holiday party, and someone's loaded out of their mind, and they're about to step in their car, and you say, I'd be happy to drive you home. And that person says, I'm fine, I'm good to go. And that person is now going to drive home and maybe hurt someone. Or I say happy holidays to someone because I don't know what they celebrate, Kwanzaa, so myself, Hanukkah, and someone says to me, it's Christmas time. Don't give me this happy holidays crap. I've had it all. So how do you, whether it's the person loaded getting in their car, or someone who's belligerent, just you say something and they say something back to you about happy holidays. How do you just sort of let that go?
Yeah. So the first thing is,
Are you going to repeat the question?
oh, you repeat it. Thank you.
So, just because of the recording, your question is two questions. How do you handle the drunk guy that's going to get into his car and doesn't want your help and you're worried what the consequences may be? How do you handle the person who doesn't appreciate you saying happy holidays because they have a different belief structure and they respond nastily to you? So how do you handle those things that are abrupt and confrontational?
So to address the first question about the alcoholic, and I had a beautiful example of that. Years ago, I was in a gas station, and this fellow was drunk who had come in. and there was someone else there. And he says, you can't drive? Oh, I can drive, I'm fine. He called the police. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful way to deal with that alcoholics. So that's the way to address that first part.
I'm just saying, that if someone comes out of a Christmas party, gets in their car,
Yeah.
and you're right next to them, and by the time I call the police, who knows what could happen on the way home?
Well, that may be true, but at least you have their license plate number that you can tell them. Anyway, it's a good question, and it comes back to our responsibility as a good citizen. Again, I have a very integrated approach to my mindfulness practice. It is Western and Eastern. And as I've talked, I really believe so strongly that it is awareness of this wounding that we all carry, that manifests moment to moment. And I just keep trying to remember the fact that I know I have a wounding and that person has a wounding. And if he's saying something to me, I don't know his history. I don't know what's going on within him. And part of it is, I think it's a long practice to do this. The critical aspect about mindfulness is, it's not about being non-judgmental. Let me ask you this question. How do you be non-judgmental? How do you be non-judgmental? John Kabat-Zinn, because this is really what we're talking about here. How am I in relationship with my experience? That's what mindfulness is all about. To know what you know and to be in a skillful relationship with it. Contemporary definition of mindfulness is awareness of the present moment on purpose, non-judgmentally. So I ask you, what does non-judgmental mean, and how do you do it? How do you do non-judgmental?
I just read something and I haven't practiced it, but I just read it's by observing the judging without judging it.
Mm-hmm. And how do you do it? You haven't read the article yet. Okay. So, but seriously, you're all here. Everyone here has heard of mindfulness before. How do you do it? How do you do mindfulness?
We all recognize that we judge. I think that's the number one thing. Don't you think that we all know inherently we have biases? And so we have to be aware, what you said about how would you use the emotional cue that you did before about recognizing feeling, and you could identify it as a separate. That's judging.
Enrage, outrage?
No, how you talked about sitting, that I'm feeling, earlier about how that's sadness.
Oh,
That's
knowing sadness. Yeah.
So knowing judgment, knowing that knowing judgmentalness, or however you want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be also part of it, is recognizing?
That is a good start, absolutely, to dealing and not being judgmental. We're actually going to do a session on March 16th. 4 people, Joan, myself, Christine Francoeur, and Mary Wallace, on mindfulness in terms of a discussion. Maybe I shouldn't leave too much out of the bag here, because then you won't come.
Oh, interactive.
I think this is the critical aspect about how we are in relationship with the present moment. meta-awareness to know what you know. You need to know, I'm angry, I'm upset, whatever. But then how do you come to a relationship of equanimity, not judgment, at least my perspective? Equanimity means you're able to accept, be open, and allow whatever arises without a preference for it, without desire or aversion for it. Being non-judgmental is not equanimity in its full. Non-judgmental may be an aspect of equanimity, but it is not. Because I can be non-judgmental. You know, I can come from my discerning adult perspective and say consciously, okay, I'm not going to judge Joan for cutting me off in traffic. But that doesn't change my underlying tendency to judge. The essence of all of this keeps coming back to insight into how we construct our sense of reality. It all comes back to the sense that we reference everything to who we believe we are. And it is a long, long, committed process to have insight into how we do that. You know, my practice is really devoted mostly to what is called emptiness, how we fabricate our reality. And I sort of look at it and say, yeah, this is where I've been in the last couple of years. And then you have all these old journals that go back 20 years. Oh, it says the same thing then. But I had no understanding of what it meant. I think what's important is to have a map, an overarching understanding of what this is all about. That we create a sense of reality, we create a sense of self. I own it and I suffer. And all I could suggest that you do now is to give yourself one cue when you get upset. And that is to say, my dear child, what is calling to be heard? My dear child, what is calling to be heard? And in that statement, what you're trying to remind yourself is that I am wounded like everybody else. Something is being triggered in me. I'm creating a sense of self. And ideally, if I could let go of it, that would be great. I'm not there. I've got a ways to go. But at least I'm planting the reminder, my dear child, what is calling to be heard. And so when you get upset and irritated, remember to say that. And it's a way of anchoring yourself into your history. It may not release it, but it may give you a little pause. Ah, I do have a history. And part of it is beginning to identify your belief system. And again, for some, they shouldn't go there because of previous trauma that's really quite significant. But simply, we all know our trauma. We all know our belief system for the most part. And you know, if I was to ask you, and you don't have to answer this, but internally, how would I describe myself as a child? What did I need to do to make my parents happy? Powerful one. What did I believe was not good enough in me? And becoming familiar with that belief system, you begin to see how that is what is being triggered at its core in the moment. Joe speaks to me in a way that isn't very polite. Who is this jerk? How is he talking to me? Shouldn't he be better? Adult perspective. I'm an adult. I should be treated nicely. I should be treated with respect. Dive deeper. Inner child perspective. Dad is yelling at me. I am not a good boy. I feel terrible. And so I just think that recollection, we have a few more minutes. I think that calling to mind of that is invaluable. This is a wonderful path, this mindfulness and meditation. I think they work together. I think you need to approach it without any expectation. I think you need to be open to what will be given to you as a gift. That things will change. And you coming here tonight, I think, is a wonderful statement that you want to see change within yourself. And what is there to learn that can be of value? And all I can say is I hope that what I have offered to you tonight may give you some glimpse, some ideas, some way of approaching your stress and your tension. Because I'm not a mindfulness teacher. I have not gone to Jack Kornfield or Tara Brach's or whoever course. I speak to you from experience, my personal experience. And I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure to be here
There is.
and to share that with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
This is a lot of years Phil has devoted to this. And it's been we exist because of his energy and devotion. Is there any other questions about how you might apply or ideas about how you might apply? Sorry, you had a question.
Just about circling back to his question about the person being offended by the happy holidays statement. Because I understand what we're learning here is how we respond to this, right? How we listen to our inner child. What would be, just because I work in public, I work in healthcare too, so we do get people that react to things, right, when you talk. What would be like an appropriate thing to say to the other person? Do you think that would help diffuse or like maybe that's a little bit like knowing how we're gonna react and what we wanna work on and how we're gonna handle this, but what would be the appropriate thing to say to that person in that moment who is frustrated, offended, upset, because you made a comment, right, that was not meant to be judgmental, but that's how
Yeah.
you received it, right, as offensive or judgmental.
So there's so many wonderful techniques out there. And have you heard of NVC, nonviolent communication? Beautiful, beautiful. So NVC, nonviolent communication with Marshall Rosenberg. And it sort of boils down to a lot of the inquiry questions that I took, modeled on him. Observation, meaning, need, feeling, relationship. So in essence, it's sort of acknowledging, boy, are you really feeling angry? So you're sort of identifying what they're feeling as a way of sort of the introduction to it. But I'm not a master on NVC. I've taken its course, and I would think that I would suggest looking at it as a resource. But I think that may be the way to start, is acknowledging what they're feeling.
As a way to sort of disarm them.
Yeah.
Without hopefully
Although sometimes in saying that, it can trigger them. I remember a colleague, I said that to him and he said, yeah, of course I'm angry, can't you see? So you don't always get the expected response, but good question, and NVC is a wonderful technique. And Jay Ofer offers, I think I got his name right, offers actually some free training online, and he's a very good teacher.
You said earlier about the 90 seconds to emotional regulation and how breathing and focusing, you won't necessarily have the 90 seconds, but there's a good podcast on that. Jay Shetty has like the #1 podcast, and there's an episode that's specifically about 90 seconds to emotional regulation. And I found it enlightening, and because I also work in healthcare and I would have people, and one of the things that I learned is that, and again, between every action and your response is a moment for thinking. And that's where you can say, I'm sorry, was I disrespectful? Or didn't mean to be disrespectful? Have I offended you somehow? And, just trying to channel peace and equanimity and acceptance. It's hard day in, day out when people are not good to you. But if you can diffuse yourself and regulate yourself, it will have a calming effect, I found, with my interactions with around patients.
Good question, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
When you talk about belief system, if we're trying to identify our belief system, would you say that most of the time it's going to be one dominant belief system that we would have? Or would there be like a few, or?
I think there tends to be, there can be multiple beliefs you have, but often it does boil down to one sort of dominant theme that gets triggered again and again. And good resources are Gabor Mate, and I'm not getting his name right, von Besselmeyer. Yes. So those are two excellent resources who really dwell and look how our wounding plays out in the current moment to moment. So to summarize, ABCDE. When you're stressed out, can you be aware? Label your experience. Bring your attention immediately to your breath and try and take 5 if you can. Anchor into your body and experience. Don't run away from it. And if you can, sustain body sensation until it extinguishes. Cognition, C. My dear child, what is calling to be heard as the one thing you can say when you get upset, as a reminder of what's happening. Compassion, enrage and outrage. What is being triggered in me? What is being triggered in them? Do it ethically. Wait. What do I intend to do? Why am I trying to do it?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if I might just say one last thing again, January 2nd, we have no meeting because it's the day after New Year's. January the 16th, Christine Fancourt will be talking on calm, I think. We would invite you to put your chairs away, and maybe Mitch, you could help organize that for us using the, so you know what to do. 8 high.
8 high.
And again, if you would like, if this has been of value to you, none of the speakers, none of the organizers get paid for this. We have our expenses, and if you'd like to make a donation to the box in the back there, that would be appreciated. The WTN wishes you all a wonderful holiday season, whatever you might or might not celebrate.